Good morning. I'm going to call this meeting to order for Polk County Board of Commissioners for Wednesday, January 31st, 2024. All commissioners are present. Announcements are on agendas. Extra copies of the agenda were on that table, I'm sure. So hopefully y'all have them. First item up is comments that you're interested in for items that are not on this agenda, and you're limited to 3 minutes. So if y'all have anything to talk about, want us to hear, please come forward.
Yep, crane.
Please come forward so that the microphone can pick you up.
Oh,
You don't have to lean in, it'll get you. But name and address for the record, please.
Jeff Havlin, 5,000 Airedale Road. Over the last month or so, I've received this many emails. It's over 20 pages here from a guy named Mickey Garris. And in here, he makes some pretty heinous accusations concerning you three guys. So I was wondering if we could have some time at the end. You could address some of these, or maybe you'll address them during the meeting. I don't know. It's going to take more than 3 minutes. That's my question.
So Jeff, my response to you is that if I believe what you're presenting there are accusations about things that are unfounded, in my opinion, but are about things that are in litigation. And I personally will not discuss them on, in any public forum, because I will be deposed for everything that I say, and any of us will be. So we're named in a lawsuit. And because it's ongoing litigation, I think it's prudent that we not discuss it out in a public forum. It's unfortunate, from my opinion, that this guy gets to make these statements and we're unable to defend it because of the fact that we're trying to be careful not to put our taxpayers in harm's way.
And we appreciate that.
Right.
That this lawsuit is concerning the changing of duties of the treasurer. Is that what that's about? Does the lawsuit concern the potential homeless camp down there on? It doesn't. Well, in that he makes all kinds of accusations that you colluded with, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure my 3 minutes is about up, but as a concerned taxpayer of the county, even though this is going to be a Dallas problem, and I know you guys don't have any jurisdiction whatsoever. Maybe you could comment on that as far as, I mean, you guys are in collusion with this church, et cetera, et cetera. This is what he's saying. And he's going to churches and getting petitions signed. I don't know, is that even legal? Get petitions from a nonprofit that jeopardize their nonprofit?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't want to cause the church any trouble, but anyway, well, okay. Address what you can.
Jeff, I'm happy to meet with you about the homeless funding that's come through from the state to every county, and I'm happy to talk about that because I'm involved in the Mid-Atlantic Valley Homeless Alliance, which covers Marion and Polk County, and that's something that this county has been involved with for quite some time.
Right. Well, I know you guys got a bunch of money, and it was used to mitigate potential homeless people, which is a cool thing, Yeah. We're going to pay you some rent or whatever till you get on your feet. Nothing wrong with that. Wasn't our money either. But then there was the other $1 million that the state made, and I know you have no control over that. This is a law. Here's the money, do it, type of thing. I guess the city council could say, hell no, we won't go. But anyway, these are items that are, I'm hearing about it all the time, and I am damn sick and tired of these emails. All right. Thank you.
Move forward.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name's Ted Campbell. I live 1058 34th Avenue, West Salem. And I just have one question about the lawsuits. When the county wins, are they going to make him reimburse the taxpayers' dollars that were spent on this? I mean, that's only fair.
I would say it's part of ongoing litigation, but certainly as a citizen, it would be my intent that people who bring something wrongful, if that's how it's decided, pay costs, but we're a long ways away from that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come forward.
Good morning. You guys know who I am, Mickey Garris, 11050 Whitaker Road, Dallas, Oregon, 97338. And I know you won't discuss any of the litigation. You guys have made clear that you're not going to talk about much of any of the concerns. Nonetheless, the concerns have been brought forward, and there's plenty of research that's gone into it that does look like the possibility of breaking state statutes, and the county operating from 2016, possibly illegally from the resolution that you guys originally passed, that took away a lot of the duties of the duly elected treasurer. Now, I know that two of you guys weren't in office at the time. However, I also know that it was brought to your attention in public meetings and in private meetings that you guys were made aware that things weren't right and there was laws broken and you guys failed to act. So in my opinion, that makes you culpable. And I find it ironic that it's not until we started shedding light on the issue that you guys decided to do something about it. And in last week's meeting, you attempted to pass a new ordinance resolving the original resolution from 2016. And in that new ordinance, it basically gave you guys the same authorities that you tried to take. But again, it's timing of that is interesting to me. And actually in the new ordinance that you guys attempted to pass, in line item 2 of that ordinance, it says it has been determined that the duties outlined in resolution 16-03 should be enacted in their totality through the ordinance process rather than by resolution. So that sounds like an admission that the county screwed up. And to be honest, it's not that people are looking to get specific commissioners in trouble. It's that we want to hold elected officials accountable. You guys have a duty to represent us and uphold laws and constitution. And if you just came out and said, we were wrong, we screwed up, we didn't have that authority, I think most people would give you a pass. We understand you're not lawyers. We understand you don't know everything, but it's the admission that you screwed up is, I think, what your public expects to see. Now, if you didn't screw up, we want to know what the story is. Tell us how what you guys did was legal. Because it looks like what you guys were trying to do is circumvent the voters' will by stripping their elected treasurer's powers and taking it for yourself, which in my opinion eliminates the checks and balances and the person that we can hold accountable if we don't think our tax monies are spent the right way. So that's the first issue. The second issue, I'm interested why you guys tried to pass this under the emergency clause. As voters, we get very frustrated when Salem tries to force legislation down our throat under the emergency clause, so the public don't have a say in what's happening, and it's implemented immediately. Again, you guys have been operating like this since 2016, that you tried to pass this ordinance to rectify what you did wrong under the emergency clause, which eliminates the first reading, the second reading, and the ability for the public to really weigh in on this. So that's the second question I have. Why under the emergency clause? Why was it such an emergency all of a sudden that it had to be fixed under that emergency clause? And then the third point I'd just like to eventually get an answer to is, we're talking about the audit today, which is why a lot of people came, because an email went out that you guys are going to discuss the audit, and I've mentioned auditing Polk County in some of the emails that I have sent. This is not the audit I am looking for. I am looking for a forensic audit of Polk County, not the audit. This is the annual standard audit that happens all the time. And I'd also be interested to hear this company that is auditing Polk County, that we're getting the report from now. How many years have they been doing business with Polk County? I've heard that they've been with Polk County for almost 30 years. So I would like a different company, and if transparency is really what you guys are after, I'm going through the legal process to try to get a forensic audit. I'll tell you guys right now, I'm walking through that. But you guys, if you really want to stop things, if you're really not concerned with anything that's been happening here, you guys could say, you know what, we see your concerns, and we're going to hire an outside company to do a forensic audit publicly, maybe put a citizen group together that is our peers, that we can oversee and work with this forensic auditing company and see what the results are. If there's nothing to hide, I think that would be the fastest way to put a stop to this. Thank you.
You. Good morning.
My name is Chip North, 14908 Burns Corner Road, Monmouth, Oregon. And I just stand in support of the First Amendment and Mickey's right to express his redress grievances to his elected officials, his elected employees. And so even though I don't know all of what Mickey's seen or researched, I support his right to express these things without threat of lawsuit or, condemnation by his fellow citizens. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Commission.
Morning.
Staff. My name is Stephen Pickering. I live at 1895 Southwest Church Street in the city of Dallas, Oregon. I'm not Mickey Garris. And although people have said sometimes I talk like him, because I have everything he just said when he was up here, you can put in a record, has my opinion and feelings and thoughts also to the T. Not because Mickey said them, but because it's what I feel. This body may not have been here when some of these events occurred, but they knew of them or should have known of them. That makes you a part of it. As far as the legal things going on, I'm not going to address that. I don't expect you to. I will address that members of this body did indeed do things that were not good for the city of Dallas in regards to the Church of the Park. And you still could do things to stop that. You could look deeper into what you became involved in and requested come here. And that includes you, Mr. Gordon. I see you interested in my comment. That should not have happened. That was not your doing. That was not something you should have been involved in. This county, I know from being here at various budget hearings and stuff over the years, does a very adequate job of taking care of the homeless people that were here. We did not need you can't call them a for-profit because legally they're not, but we did not need an organization like Church in the Park inviting additional homeless people here, especially after you have moved those services. So having addressed that, I want to go right into the emergency clause. As has already been stated, you guys knew about this a long time ago, and you could have taken care of it if it needed to be over a period of time. But by doing that and then following up with the announcement of the audit and all, I get the feeling that you're trying to cover up previous potentially even criminal activities that were going on. I want my elected official returned to the job that we elected them to do as the state outlines that job. I thank you very much for your time, all of you, and I would just ask that you do the best you can for all the people of this county. Right now, I don't feel you're doing that, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Thank you very much for your time and your service to us.
Thank you. Yep. Any other comments? Please.
I'm Pat Wildman, 2452 East Ellendale, Dallas. As I understand it, the governor put this business of this homeless stuff on Polk County. Tried to put it on south of here, tried to put it on other places. There have been ways that has been taken care of, and it's now been shoved here. Therefore, I don't think you guys asked for it. And so I'm saying you're being accused of things that really weren't in your job description. And there's more to it, but anyway, encouraging you to keep doing. I think you all are doing a good job.
Anyone else? Okay. We will move on then. Next item is approval of the agenda.
Also move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously. Approval of minutes of January 24th.
Also move.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously. Approval of consent calendar.
Also move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Passed unanimously. Next up is the presentation of the Polk County audit. So we had Brad Bingenheimer and Kathy Wilson from Singer Luwak. And Caitlin, are you going to open or are we just going to have them start? Right. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us today. Yes, I'm Brad Bingenheimer, partner with accounting firm Singer Luwak, with our office located here in Salem. And with me today is
I'm Kathy Wilson. I'm the Director of Governmental Sector for Singer Luwak.
and we have once again served as auditors for the county, and we have issued our report on the county's financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2023. The report that we've issued is what we would consider to be an unmodified report, which basically says that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects, the financial position and results of operations of the county for the year ended June 30, 2023. During the year, the county did implement a new accounting standard. There was a new standard out that talked about, it's kind of the title is subscription-based information technology agreements, which basically says, when you enter into a multi-year agreement for any kind of technology that doesn't have tangible substance, that basically says, well, that's still a multi-year agreement that obligates you for future outflows. And the accounting standard basically that was implemented this year as required says, well, that should be represented as a liability because it's obligated you for future outflows. And of course, you also have an offsetting asset that you've acquired that would then be amortized over the life of the agreement. So this was a new standard that was implemented this year in the financial statements. So it didn't have a very significant effect, but it was a new standard that was implemented. So where'd the county end up? Well, at the end of the year, June 30, 2023, your total assets and deferred outflows had an increase of 6.9 million to a total of $128.8 million. Your total liabilities and deferred inflows had a decrease of $4.5 million with a ending balance of $75.5 million. That results in an increase in the net position of the county of $11.4 million, which now stands at the end of the year at $53.3 million. Total revenues of the county were $80.8 million, which is an increase of 2.9 from the prior year. That increase is largely related to intergovernmental revenues in the form of grants and similar type of revenues. Those increased between last year and this year $9 million. That's represented the largest, increase. Of course, then likewise, your expenditures increase because you get grants to make expenditures. So your expenditures increased over the prior year of $9.5 million with a total of $69.4 million of expenditures. Of course, one of the things I always like to point out and talk about when I have the chance is talk about the liability that's presented in the financial statements that is the result of the county's participation in Oregon retirement system, PERS. The net pension liability that you report, which is, your proportionate share as calculated by Oregon PERS and audited by other auditors, you have a total, your share of it is $32.9 million, which was an increase of 8.4 from the prior year. Now, if you look on page 59 of the report, this has a schedule of what that liability has been over the last 10 years. And just look at the last few years, you'll see it's fluctuated a lot. In 2020, and these are measured a year prior, according to standards. So if you look at it that was reported for the plan year end of 2020, you had a net pension liability of $42 million. The next year in 21, that all of a sudden decreased to $24 million. And then in this year, of course, we're reporting at this liability of basically $33 million. These things go up and down, and it is kind of one of the things that you have to take in consideration when considering this liability that's reported. There's a lot of volatility in it because it's based on two items, and these are beyond your control. These are all things related to how PERS in Oregon operates, which is basically, you have two elements of it. One is the total pension liability, which is the present value of expected future cash outflows for PERS. Compare that at a point in time, June 30, 22 for the current year, to the value of the assets that PERS is holding. Well, as markets change and those asset values change substantially, you get these fluctuations in this liability that really, in my opinion, make it a little bit less informational. So the most important piece of this information, I think, is on the following page, on page 60 of the report, which talks about your contribution amount. So your contribution right now stands at about 22.5 cents for every dollar of PERS payroll. So this will continue to be a significant item for the county. I would expect as things happen, that you expect those rates to continue to increase as you see in this historical schedule. So it's just something to keep in mind as we go forward into the future. In addition to our report on the financial statements, we've also issued a report under the requirements of the Oregon minimum standards for audits of municipal corporations. Those standards require us to look at specific Oregon laws and regulations and perform tests of your compliance with those. We found a couple small items regarding your budgetary process. The ARPA fund didn't have things appropriated, didn't have transfers separately appropriated from other expenditures, very small. And then we had a couple of very small over expenditures of your budgetary appropriations in a couple funds. So very minor on that point. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kathy, who's going to talk about the federal compliance report.
Thank you. You'll notice that the federal compliance report is a separate document. And so in that, In the very back, page 10 and 11, you'll see the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. The county received about $8.5 million worth of federal awards this year that they expended. This is based on expenditures, not monies received. And in this report, we have two reports that we issue, one under government auditing standards. And that talks about compliance related to government auditing standards. And those are specific things that we look at related just to that standard. And then we did not find any instances of non-compliance related to government auditing standards. The uniform guidance, we have our opinion in there regarding the major program that we audited this year, which was the coronavirus state and local fiscal relief funds, excuse me, that's a little bit of a mouthful. That's the ARPA monies. And so that was your major program that was audited this year based on formula. And in our opinion, that program complied in all material respects to the requirements of uniform guidance. We did have one finding, however, it was not considered to cause a material noncompliance. That was related to your procurement procedures that you did for the police, I think it was
The jail
police-
TV.
Oh, the jail security cameras, that was it. And so the county had implemented their modified procurement procedure in obtaining the vendor to do this work. But federal uniform guidance requires that your procedures can't be less restrictive than the Fed's procedures. And so, which require a formal RFP to be issued for those. So that was what this finding is. And the county has provided their response for that. And that will be issued to the Data Compliance Center for the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And you know, all of that will be taken care of. Any questions?
A general question back to the PERS issue. Our budget committee recently approved creating a separate fund to ensure kind of equitable tracking and contribution to that PERS liability. Are you seeing that in other institutions that we sort of track that separately? Because it is obviously on all of our minds every year.
We have had other municipalities create, basically PERS stabilization funds or something like that, where they're setting, they're currently setting money aside, knowing that there's going to be future increases, so they can use those resources as those increased contribution rates kick in, so that they can maintain the same level of services. So they are kind of, putting money away for that purpose. Yeah, I think that's going to become, a more commonplace practice. We have several that are doing that. I mean, they recognize this is going to be a significant cost going forward. As more and more public employees are retiring, I mean, they're reaching retirement age in droves right now. It's going to just, I think, drive that up. Of course, PERS, they have their fiduciary duties for investing those funds. So that's, they're going to be very cautious in how they invest. It's not like, your own personal 401k where you're at risk. I mean, they have, the entire PERS system that they have to look out for. So they're very conservative in their investing, but still you'll see even in conservative, the fluctuations, given the markets that we've seen over the last few years has just really, played havoc with these liabilities. So, yeah.
Thanks.
I have a question, Kathy, for you, specific to what you finished on and the anomaly that you were citing with regard to generally ARPA dollars and federal compliance. Curious from your professional take on how often have you seen that happen since this ARPA money came forward?
Yeah, well, ARPA came without a bunch of rules,
Oh, yeah.
first of all.
So I
you
wanted
know,
to
it
get that
came
part
out.
on the record.
And then there was kind of a catch up there that first year as they implemented those rules,
Right.
6-8 months later. And we have seen people with findings or governments with findings related to this just because, first of all, federal grants are complex and everyone has its own set of rules and how you have to follow it. The 2 CFR 200 though is the guiding document for uniform guidance. And so if there's ever any question as to what you should or shouldn't be doing, that would be the guidance that you would want to refer to and look at that in detail, because each program underneath, with the exception maybe of a couple of HUD programs, because they can fly on their own, follows that. So
So my question was more specific to, in your professional trade, how often have you seen this
The,
anomaly?
where you've had a less restrictive policy,
Yeah.
not seen that a lot, actually.
And then additionally, then my question also is, again, because we have a statement to that, and a reason why, we're rebutting it. And so I guess the question is, in your professional experience, to both of you, how likely is it that the federal government's going to say, it doesn't matter? You're going to follow this now to the letter of the law.
Well, the federal government is always going to, they issue their laws. And, they do expect, entities to follow them. That's without question. The question becomes more, how severe is this? In my opinion, this is not very severe. Non-compliance, because, and as Kathy said, it didn't affect, you've still materially complied with the requirements. And, given the amount of money, I mean, you expended roughly $5.8 million under this program out of 8.4 of your total federal money. There's a lot of transactions, so if you trip up on one thing, that's not, in my opinion, a very significant item. But it's still something, we're required to report as auditors. We do find something, we have to report it. But yeah, this is not exactly a significant one. I would say that, we've seen more findings over the last, ever since, the pandemic started, we've seen more findings over the last, 3-4 years than I've ever seen. And part of it is, because we have had so much money flooding into local governments with, as Kathy said, sometimes not a lot of guidance up front. It's like, here, you have it, go spend. And then they come out later and tell you, well, here are the rules that you should have followed all along. That doesn't help too much. So we have those. And along with, at the same time, during the pandemic and even continuing forward, is we have a shortage of staff in local governments in the accounting system, in the accounting functions. That's just a trend we've seen. If you've ever tried lately to hire somebody in an accounting position in a local government, it's a tough sell to find somebody. The pool of eligible candidates is very small. And so there's also been, a few times where, not in this case, but in sometimes we've seen it because there just weren't people there to make sure all the checks and balances were in place. We don't have this here. This was just, you were following your procedures. Just those were not quite what the federal procedures are required to be.
Thank you. Make my case for why financial operations are so complex when you're dealing with federal dollars and grant applications and compliance issues and on and on and on. It's a very, very deep issue it takes a lot of skills.
It does. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Kudos to our finance office. Well done. Thank you, Greg.
Yes, I would like to add to that. I want to give thanks to Caitlin and her team for providing all the information that we needed when we were here auditing. They were prompt and they were responsive, and we really appreciate that.
I'll just say, depending on the response from the federal government on our rebuttal, if it warrants a relook at our procurement process for IT, we could look at that, but we'll find out more later.
Yeah. Well, and clearly to that point, we do that because it changes every year, right? It doesn't just stay static. So it's constantly evolving.
Right.
Yes.
So it's just all we can do to keep up with it. Thank you for your work. I appreciate your report.
Thank you very much for having us today.
You may make a motion to accept the audit.
I'll move to accept the audit as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the audit as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Thank you for that, Mr. Hanson. Next up is we have a Polk County Behavioral Health Update. Well, Carol, good morning.
Morning. All right, thank you for having me. As you are all very aware, behavioral health is a bit of an iceberg. We could spend days going through all the updates and all the things that are happening and moving everywhere. So for the sake of brevity, I've done my best to isolate just those things that I think are really popping up above the surface right now that are actionable, that you may be encountering. And then if there are things you want to ask questions about or things you want me to drill down on, I'm happy to come back and go into any depth you want about any of the topics that are out there. So jumping in, I wanted to give you an update on where we are with our contract. As you know, we're funded with two major contracts, one coming from the state for safety net and the other coming from Pacific Source. You approved the Pacific Source contract for Medicaid services in the last couple of weeks, so that one is in place, good to go. We have been dealing with a series of extensions on our state contract, which is referred to as the CFAA or the County Financial Assistance Agreement. In fact, we did 3 6-month extensions while we battled through some language adjustments on that with the state over the last 18 months. So we did finally receive a final contract that appears to be something that is good to go. So I'm anticipating being able to submit that to you in the next week or so with a recommendation to sign. That contract had 2 major areas that we've been working on some resolution for. One had to do with county liability for aid and assist. While that is not completely resolved, I think there has been good movement. And I can submit to you kind of where the progress is to date on that work group and some work that the county councils have done around some risk mitigation. By and large, it sounds like with the time that has transpired and the ability to move some of the things that are preventing some of the larger issues, such as making statutory changes and whatnot, this is a good first step. So most of the participants have agreed that this is a good show of faith, if nothing else, and there is movement to try to mitigate some of that risk.
Sorry to interrupt, Noel.
Yep, go ahead.
That liability issue is important. There's also the funding piece of aid and assist and community restoration. I'm hearing that there will be funding coming through the short session to help fill some of those aid and assist gaps. I don't know what you've heard, but.
What I'm hearing is that that's unclear.
Okay.
So right now, what I can tell you is that we were not funded for aid and assist specifically to the level that we had anticipated.
Mhm.
We were not given a great answer as to why that occurred. And we were basically told to hang on, that there was work being done to try to garner more funding.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that that comes through because what we had based our projections on, based on previous conversations, came in much lower with this contract.
Okay.
So,
Can you move that microphone a little bit closer? Apparently folks in the back of the room cannot hear you.
yes. Is that any better?
I don't know.
They won't. The microphones are only.
Okay.
So I can try to project.
Yes,
If
please.
that doesn't blow people out on the recording.
Pat, if you want to move up to or move a chair up, do what you need.
Okay. The second issue regarding the contract has to do with the state had gone through and did a red line version where they removed the language that said that we were obligated to provide services as funding allowed. They essentially wanted us to remove that and just say, no, we were obligated to provide the services regardless of what we were funded for. And we obviously pushed back, said that was not something that made sense. It wasn't prudent. We weren't going to do that. So we have worked to come up with a happy medium in that regard. They have itemized the service elements that they're referencing that they believe that would apply to. And there's a caveat that should we believe that the funding has been exhausted for those areas, that there's a process that we go through with the state to review that and come up with an interim plan to cover those services. So again, I think that meant the spirit of the intent of what we were trying to accomplish, that we're not out here left on the hook to do something that they're not adequately supporting, and that there's a good faith effort to come together and work through those issues if they arise. So with those two pieces seeming to make good strides, I again anticipate that contract coming over with the recommendation for signature. It's been held up the last week because the state did catch that about half the counties, us included, received a couple of the funding pages that had an error on them. So they are in the process of resending those funding pages so that those are accurate as of this week. So that's where the contract is at. As far as some of our program development and updates, there's a collaboration currently underway between Public Health's jail medical program, our behavioral health med management program, and jail staff to provide psychiatric nurse practitioner services within the jail for up to 12 hours a week. Basically serving anybody who's come into the jail in custody who might currently be on psychiatric medication and need that maintained, or is having a psychiatric crisis that would need to be seen by somebody of that caliber. So that we have located a contracted provider to do those services, and they should be starting in March. So that's pretty exciting for us, and I think will help with people not going into jail and then coming out worse than when they went in, which obviously we don't want. So crisis expansion, that's been a year plus in the making. The rules for the new crisis programming went into effect as of January 1. As of today, we are not fully in compliance with those rules, nor is most of the rest of the state. And the Oregon Health Authority is very aware of that. So they have given us until March to attest that we're in compliance, or to establish a waiver with the state that acknowledges their understanding that certain areas we have not been able to comply with and what the plan is to address any gaps that might exist. So the gap that I'm anticipating that we're currently not able to meet is that they require us to have teams of 2 available 24/7 ongoing. The first issue we have with that, and most of the smaller counties are in the same boat, is it doesn't make any sense financially to do that. When we look at our data, we get maybe a handful, 2, 3, 4 calls a year within the hours that are in the middle of the night. So paying for 2 people to be on shift all year long, 7 days a week, just doesn't make any sense financially. So how we can be given some flexibility to still respond when those things occur without having to do it with such a robust and financially costly model is what we're after. Otherwise, I think we will be in a good place to attest that we've met the rest of the spirit of the programming requirements.
Local flexibility is really important.
And local flexibility is absolutely essential.
And,
Yep.
just talk with Jennifer Lee, who manages this. Her relationship with the sheriff's office and other municipal law enforcement's been great because the funding was decoupled for that piece, but we're still putting that together in a locally responsive way.
Yes.
I want to mention.
Yes.
So appreciate you navigating that.
And actually going along with that, I wanted to make you aware that we will be moving some of the departments within the academy building over the next month, 6 weeks. So with family and community outreach relocating to their new building, that's given us some very needed space to move some folks around within the academy. So for crisis services, this is going to be absolutely essential as far as meeting the new rules. What we're going to be doing is moving where administration currently resides on the 2nd floor over to the space where FCO was. That's going to free up that large suite on the 2nd floor, including the large adjacent break room. That whole suite is going to become crisis services, and the adjacent break room is being repurposed into the stabilization unit. So we're going to be enacting the programming now and begin practicing and working through that, even though we don't have all of our new structures in place that we would in the next couple of years. So that will be pretty exciting. We're also going to be bringing down our ACT services to live next door to the crisis services. They often serve a lot of the same clientele, and that will allow us to really separate those community-based and crisis services from our more traditional outpatient clinic services, which will reside on the 3rd floor. So if you're looking for us, we might have moved around. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight, I know there are many things happening with the legislative session, but a couple of them that are of particular interest to us. One has to do with a funding request regarding community restoration, which Commissioner Gordon kind of speaks to some of the gap that's somewhat related to aid and assist. But for folks who are not able to aid and assist in their own defense, trying to find a way that we can grow the funding and the programming for folks that we're trying to restore to that level, because they are being released into the community. So we have to have services in place to support them to get them back to that level if that's the intention. As you can see from the graph I've given you, since July 2022 to September of 2023, that population statewide has nearly doubled, not quite. And the funding has remained static during that period of time at 22 million. So we're asking only for an increase of $7.5 million statewide to try to do that as an initial step. There have been some proposals put forward as far as what that programming should look like, where those gaps are, how to build some program by program steps that are very targeted for that population. So I'm hoping that you're hearing some things about that, and we would very much like that supported. The second one is LC 115, which is titled Strengthening Behavioral Health Service Delivery. This does two things. What this LC would basically do would be to require that there is a financial review of the cost of delivering behavioral health services every 5 years. And the reason that that's important is because to date, OHA does not regularly review what it actually costs us to deliver any of these services. We have some services that we are still running on the same funding we were given in 2009 without any look at what has happened to those populations or the requirements around the service elements. So as those gaps are widening in those areas, we need to push back and say, if you want us to do these services, we're here, we're willing to do it. We want to take care of our community, but you have to fund us appropriately to do it. Now, going with that, and just as important, this LC would also then highlight inefficiencies that have occurred in the system. Because the second you see costs, people are going to say, why does it cost that much? And those questions need to be asked and they need to be dug at. And what they're going to find is that the system, when it bifurcated between OHA and the CCO, you have duplication left in the system, and both of those systems are still driving towards the CMHPs as their answer. So anytime somebody needs data, OHA needs data to give to the legislature, they're coming to the CMHP to collect that data, mine that data, track that with staff that we're having to hire to do that. OHA then gives money to the CCOs and they say, make sure you tell us what you did with it. They're coming to us and saying, give us the data to send back to OHA. I mean, it ends up being this huge inefficient system that nobody is tracking. And we're not able to speak loudly enough to the right people to help them understand this. Dollars will help them understand that. So if we can force them to fund us appropriately, see the costs that are being incurred and challenge those costs for the sake of efficiency, we'll make progress. So that's the other area that I think we really need to focus on from our point of view.
This is really geeky, but I find this exciting.
Me too, yes.
Fighting inefficiencies, not only is it not cost effective to, enter data multiple times in multiple systems for multiple reporting purposes, but there's a real impact on the person trying to seek services and your frontline staff, your assessment folks, your peer support. Can you talk a little bit about if you had your dream scenario of efficiencies and streamlining, what that would mean just for the consumer of services?
For the consumer, right up front, just to register for services, today we have 3 different sets of data we have to collect from a demographic standpoint. And it's not just, we're not just collecting the data and keying it in and giving it to 3 different people. They're asking the question 3 different ways that we're required to collect in 3 different ways, which means we're asking the consumer 3 different times, well, tell me about X.
Which could be a very personal traumatic.
It could be a very personal traumatic. It could be everything from how they're asking, are you a veteran? Do you have a veteran in your family? Or do you have you had experience with somebody in the armed forces? They keep nuancing this from 3 different avenues. And we're asking this question because we're required to answer it the way it's been given to us. So the consumer is like, why are you drilling me on this? And that's just one tiny example of probably 25, 30 points that we're having to go over with folks. So it's inefficient, it's annoying. And it honestly turns some people away because it becomes so cumbersome and difficult to even get through the registration. They're like, my goodness, when we get into my issues, what's it gonna look like?
It's interesting. Willamette Health Council wants to invest in the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance to look at how we can bridge health and behavioral health systems with housing and homelessness systems for the same results. Let's do a single intake that's trauma informed. Let's get people to services as efficiently as possible to have the best outcomes. Be really interested to hear your thoughts on that. They're different worlds. So I worry that we're going to add in more complexity if we're doing this, but the Alliance elevated the Health and Safety Committee to work right under the board. And that's going to be a big goal of ours in the strategic planning to help with that. So any advice you have as we do that, I might give you a call.
Sure.
Thanks.
Happy to. So those are really the highlights that I wanted to bring forward, and happy to answer any of the things that are on your mind or prepare any further presentations and come back.
I don't know, how are you doing staffing? Because I know right now, seeing through the meetings, every county is trying to find something that doesn't exist, such as people qualified to do these jobs.
Yep.
How are we doing here at Polk County?
Honestly. And I'm gonna give you honest, you know, I'm going to. We have been doing quite a bit better up until very recently than most counties because we have made very small adjustments. And we've really focused an investment in retaining the staff we had and really trying to meet them where their needs are. Bringing new people in continues to be very, very difficult. So our best investment continues to be our current workforce and retaining them. However, that has gotten more and more difficult. Other places are getting more creative in enticing people to try other things. And I think the gap is starting to widen with our current staff. So we're beginning to see some more turnover there. We are not able to recruit new folks out of the workforce who have experience. Right now, what we're doing is really growing our own. We've really invested in a pipeline of students and developing those students and turning them into eventually employable staff that we're bringing on board. And that's not a bad strategy. But when that's your primary strategy, you begin to lose the mentorship and the ability of them to really learn from that workforce that has more experience. And we're beginning to see some of the impacts of that happening right now. The other thing that I think is impacting us significantly and is the area that I have the greatest concern is in the lack of interest of our staff to move into leadership roles and our absolute inability that seems very consistent around the state with trying to hire somebody in who has experience in any of these management positions is nearly impossible. We are not, we're being put up against CCOs, hospital systems that are all hiring similar positions. And they're just completely different worlds as far as your compensation packages and what we're offering. So it's just been extremely difficult. So to that end, what we have done is we've gotten very creative and we're pushing some boundaries differently internally. And I had it on here at one point. I took it off because I didn't know that you wanted to go into this, but you asked. What we have done this year is we've flipped the internal management structure we have. So instead, historically, like you guys would often ask me, who's in charge of crisis services? And in the past, I would have said, well, Jennifer Leaf's in charge of crisis services. And really, she is still our expert on that. But we are no longer using a linear siloed chain of command hierarchical structure. Because what that means is we put all of our eggs in one basket of one expert that knows everything throughout the entire silo for that all the way through. We need more diversity, more cross-training, more ability to absorb a loss when those losses occur. So we have flipped our system into a team-based management structure. So if we have somebody who is overseeing our clinical service delivery, it's across clinical services. It's no longer the clinical service delivery for crisis or the clinical service delivery for outpatient. It's clinical service delivery. That's been a challenge for our staff. They're going through some growing pains, but the other thing that we've done in doing that is we've broken down the pieces of that structure into smaller pieces that our line staff can actually receive some financial incentives for taking on pieces of that. And we're building growth ways of building people into leadership internally by giving them the ability to take those things on and try them out slowly and find out they like things, which is less of a risk than saying, I want to apply for that whole different job and leave what I'm doing behind. So we've built our own internal pathways to try to accommodate that. But overall, we're struggling just like everybody else.
So the state continues to shove things on the counties to address these needs on a local basis. They would like to see 36 behavioral health resource centers built, which isn't financially sound nor sustainable. And I know they gave $30 million for 36 facilities, which we all know won't even scratch the surface. Have you spoken to any of our neighboring counties considering regional locations, such as a burn center for 3 counties that our sheriff's department could take people in crisis to, or work jointly? Because staffing 36 facilities, those people don't exist. But if we get strategically placed 3 to 4 secure, safe mental health facilities throughout the state that we could all tap into? Has that been spoken about at your level?
So the burn models are regional to some extent in that you were able to have partners from that region say, I want to be a part of that model. So that was already something that came out when they did the RFP for that. They also said that each county has to have their own, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have regional partners all playing in that. It wasn't just put on the county to create.
Right.
To get beyond that, to actually just have like, say, one for a 5-county region or a 3-county region, the way that it's currently designed would not be doable because you have to have somebody who's actually controlling the things with the accountability that's required at the state level. It would cause more of a administrative burden and inefficiency. You'd spend more time trying to coordinate to get the stuff you needed than just getting it done.
Thank you.
So right now, because of the structure, we're caught a little bit, but if we were to back up to the beginning and redesign from the get-go, that would have been a possibility.
Outside of the burns, though, just to kind of build on what Commissioner Morris mentioned, that the secure residential treatment facilities for folks who are potential danger to self and others. I know Marion County struggles with this a little bit more, and we looked at possibly if there were a facility to rent beds, would that have a similar administrative burden if we were able to, or collaborate in that way?
For secure residential specifically, no.
No.
That's a different beast. I
Right.
think you can collaborate on a regional level with that.
Okay.
The difficulty with secure residential right now is those are all controlled by the state. So we can collaborate on putting something together that we can support, we can provide that, but once it's built, the state directs the placements.
Mhm.
So even if we say we want to be able to make sure we came to this with Marion and Yamhill or whomever, right? And the 3 counties say, we want to prioritize putting our folks into that placement. Today, the way it sits, the rules don't allow us to do that. The state decides who has the priority need to go into that, regardless of where that facility is sited. So that continues to be one of the barriers. However, there is talk about creating a new one that we're still challenging that premise and trying to get movement, but having something like that in place is just a different animal because of the rules around it. So you can do a regional SRTF much more easily.
And it involves a much smaller population.
Much smaller population and a larger group of partners coming around it that usually have the hospitals involved with that. And so it's a different set of resources and a different set of administrative management that comes into play.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Good report.
Well,
All right, we are going to waive item 9 for today because of technical difficulties. That was going to be a Zoom presentation. So we will reschedule that, and that completes our regular agenda. Do we have a need for an executive session?
Just the board will meet in executive sessions pursuant to ORS 192-667H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed.